This week's Grandmaster is the Lake of Shadows, and a lot has changed since the last time around. We've got everyone's favorite addition of the payload, a new and insanely tanky meatball boss, and they've even thrown in a tormentor just for fun. The boss room can definitely be scary if you're not set up properly, so today we'll be covering the best team comp, loadouts, and positioning strategies to make this Grandmaster a breeze. I'm Above, and if you enjoyed today's video, a like and subscription would be greatly appreciated. Now, let's get into it. Starting with my recommended team comp, we went with one Well of Radiance Warlock on Starfire Protocol, one Berserker Titan rocking the Abiant Leaps, and a Night Stalker Hunter using Aeon Swifts. Well is used for safety in several key choke points throughout this Nightfall and is a key component to baking the final boss. Berserker is used to neutralize the high volume of champions and to control the ad-dense rooms throughout this Grandmaster. Night Stalker is our main debuff to help bake the beefy bosses, while the Aeons keep our team topped off on heavy ammo. Feel free to swap Berserker for any of the Strand subclasses of your choosing, as all three of them can easily dominate this Nightfall. As for weapon loadouts, we went with one Galahorn, one Izanagi's Burden, and a Witherhorde. We paired them with one Unstoppable Scout, a disorienting grenade launcher, an anti-barrier pulse, and an SMG for ad clear, with two legendary rockets for DPS. Rockets are the key to dealing with some of the most annoying parts of this Grandmaster, as they easily bake the meatball, quickly take out threshers, and absolutely nuke the final boss. Galley enables our rocket DPS, Izanagi adds incredible burst damage to these bosses, while Witherhorde enables Starfire. Strand will do the heavy lifting against champions, so you have a ton of flexibility with your primary weapon choices here. Seeing that it's Void Surge, you can definitely go with something like Leviathan's Breath, but during my testing, rockets were far more consistent for the boss bake. As for key armor mods, I went with Heavy Ammo Finder and Scout to take advantage of the Void Surge and to help generate ammo for our Aeon Hunter. You'll also want to utilize Sect of Insight on your Aeon Gauntlets to ensure that you're generating heavy ammo when performing finishers. And though it's arc threat, I actually recommend Void Resist and Concussive Dampener to counter the Meatball's high damage Void attacks, as it's easily one of the sketchiest parts of this Grandmaster. As we dive into the Nightfall, the opening section now contains a payload, and the objective here is to escort it to the opening of the strike, where we'll use it to bring down a taken barrier. To avoid taking forever discussing this section, because it is a bit of a slog, the main thing to note here is enemy spawn management. The payload has several key progression points that will spawn enemies, and a good rule of thumb is to jump off the payload each time you see a new set of enemies spawn. A barrier will spawn near the entrance of the church, the first unstop will spawn out of a dropship in the courtyard directly across from the church, and the second unstop will spawn near the taken barrier as the payload nears its final destination. You have a ton of space to work with here, so simply take your time guiding the payload, step off and clear ads when needed, then hop back on and you'll be done with this area in no time. When the taken barrier goes down, we'll make our way to Mavic Square. Start by prioritizing the snipers on your far left and close right, then clear the rest of the courtyard. And when the last enemy dies, a dropship will appear and spawn in an unstoppable champion. It will be accompanied by several enemies, but Strand makes light work of this. And I recommend getting a finisher on the unstop here to restock on ammo. When the last enemy dies, the next wave will actually spawn directly behind you, and these enemies are sneakily dangerous, so make sure you focus them as a team. Once dead, you can hop back on the payload and progress through the next taken barrier. When the payload reaches the rusted car on your left, hop off and take out the enemies that spawn directly in front of you. You'll then want to prioritize the 4 Cabal turrets around the corner to your right, and once clear, you can focus the unstop and the rest of the enemies up the street. You can now hop back on the payload, and as you reach this set of trees, a wave of taken enemies will spawn directly in front of you. Take them out, then proceed with caution, as there's one final Cabal turret hiding behind the wall on your right. Once clear, hop back on the payload, and as it starts to round the corner, a wave of taken knights will spawn in. Strand goes huge here, so make sure you have some abilities saved for this. Once clear, hop back on the payload, but before it reaches the end, hop back off and deal with the barrier champion that spawns on your right. This will allow you to kill it before spawning the boss, which makes this part a hell of a lot easier. Get a finisher if you need it, and pop your Strand super to deal with the onrushing gladiators. And once clear, you're now ready to push the payload to its final destination. The Taken Blight will now dissipate, and the meatball will show up in its place. When this happens, I recommend popping a well on the left side of the bus and using Tether to debuff the boss. And as you can see, rockets go absolutely crazy here. We have held the boss in less than 5 seconds, which is important because enemies will spawn when the boss reaches 50% health, at which point it will proc its immunity phase. So the faster we can do this, the more time we have in our well to keep us safe during ad clear. Shift your focus to the surrounding ads, including the 2 wizards that will appear on your left-hand side. Once dead, break the taken tethers, then focus on the boss once more. The second half of the boss's health bar is a bit easier because the boss has a much more telegraphed attack with those massive Axion darts. They're quite easy to manage as long as you're paying attention to them, so I recommend that one person focuses them and the ad spawns that occur while the others do damage. And just like that, the meatball is dead, meaning we can detonate the payload and we're moving on. The second half of the strike is where Strand truly starts to shine. As the door opens, use your abilities to suspend the targets and open up some space for your fire team. There will be an unstop at the bottom of the first set of stairs, another wave of enemies down the second set of stairs, and at the bottom, you'll have a barrier champion surrounded by a massive mob of enemies. Strand takes care of this entirely, basically neutralizing the entire portion of this Grandmaster. As we head outside, drop a well and suspend the 2 yellow bar phalanxes in front of you. I recommend getting finishers here since we'll be burning through a ton of heavy ammo. The first Thresher will spawn on your right hand side and will absolutely wreck you if left alive. Dump rockets until it dies, then push up and clear enemies as you go. When you reach the first elevated catwalk, a second Thresher will spawn in and you'll want to nuke it just like we did with the first one. You're then free to push up and start taking out the sea of yellow bars surrounding the unstop, so take your time, use Strand to your advantage, and you'll be through this portion of the Nightfall in no time. As we head inside, there will be, you guessed it, another unstop. And Strand gives you that breathing room once again to enter the doorway, allowing you to get a finisher on this champion to restock on ammo. Rinse and repeat this process on the barrier as you make your way up the stairs, and you should have no problems here. As we enter the next room, wait for the taken blaster to detonate, then sprint to the close right-hand corner and drop a well. This puts you in a great position to suspend the barrier and shadow guard in front of you while breaking line of sight on the rest of the ads. Take them out, clear the rest of the room, then group up in the hallway and enter the next room together. If you enter at separate times, it can actually lock your teammates out for a few seconds, though it's not a huge deal, it's worth noting nonetheless. And now it's time for the Tormentor. Just you, the Tormentor, and this tiny little room. Lucky for us, it can be both suspended and blinded, which means we should be able to keep it suppressed by abilities at all times. While you're focusing on the Tormentor, the Acolyte eyes will spawn up around you, and these can definitely mess you up if left alive too long. So keep the Tormentor on control, take care of the Acolyte eyes as they spawn, and once dead, we're moving on. As we enter the boss room, use your shackle grenade to suspend the enemies, which will allow you and your team to jump down safely. And when the last enemy dies, the taken corruption will begin filling the arena. I want to note that you do not need to cheese the boss. We can bake it just like in the old Lake of Shadows. So move to the center of the arena and wait for your supers to regen if needed. Once ready, break the darkness node and the taken corruption will begin to dissipate. This means we can head back towards where we entered and drop a well for safety. I like to use this position because it breaks line of sight on most of the enemies in the room. As the boss spawns, drop a well, use your tether, and use your rockets to bake the boss, making the Lake of Shadows Grandmaster Nightfall a GG. If you found this guide useful, a like and subscription would be greatly appreciated. You can also catch me live over at twitch.tv/above, where I stream Destiny content almost daily. Anyways, that's it from me. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you next time.